Hi, Wolf. Appreciate it.
How's it going, Chris?
It's going pretty good. I don't think we actually ever spoke with each other, but we were both Twitter Spark members.
Yes, sir. Yep. I do remember seeing you in the program. Hope it went well for you as well.
It did. The biggest issue for my end is like Twitter Spaces and Twitter Sports are two separate entities, and so we couldn't capitalize as much because there was already people involved with Twitter Sports. It's one of these weird things with Twitter being like as decentralized as it is.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I do hear that. Pretty tough to make it there, but I can imagine, I'm always I know I use Spotify Green Room, but I think people kind of want to hear about these sports stuff live, and it's hard to get it from these podcasters, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had pretty good success, whether it's being able to talk with people in league office or in teams. The interaction is there. I think the biggest issue is with Twitter being decentralized. One team wants to go one way, one team wants to go the other, and then the team that gets the most resources wins out. And so they actually trying to do what Spotify is doing and go with like the names already known, get them locked in, and then they're going to reaccess and then probably relaunch Spark in terms of the sport programming.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear more about it. Hopefully, we'll have some time to chat, but I want to welcome in a couple of others too. Jerron, what's going on, man?
Gav, thank you for the invite. Super dope to be here. I'm excited for the game tomorrow.
Have you talked to Jalen at all?
I spoke with him after he won after he beat the Heat, and he's like, he hasn't done anything yet. I think the whole team is super focused, and they've been waiting on this time for like 6 years, and they had a rough journey this season, but past 6 years they've been waiting on this moment. So, and they responded every single game that they've lost this year. So I'm excited to see. They're not gonna let up now.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the time to shine and the real make it or break it. But yeah, absolutely. Coming out from I think January 1st, they were 50% win rate over the last 200 games. They were in the 11th spot in the East, I believe. So quite the turnarounds here to see it. I mean, Jerron, it's great having you. I appreciate you joining up for the space.
No, thank you for the invitation, man. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, Harry, is that you on the account?
Yes, sir. What's up?
Doing good, man. How you feeling?
Swell. I'm very excited for this basketball. As you know, I'm a big. I don't know. I don't know anything about basketball, but it'll be a great space.
All right.
We have some actual experts.
I'm a big basketball fan, so I'm excited to get into it. I see Ronnie. I see you're in the audience. I just shot you an invite. You just do have to be on a mobile device. Sometimes your Twitter does have to be updated, but the sooner we can get you up here. Oh, perfect. There we go. Okay, Ronnie, what's going on?
What's going on, everybody? Everybody all right?
Yes, sir. Good to have you up here. How's it
Yes,
going?
sir.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. I'm excited to join you guys. See what we're talking about today. See if we can who likes who in the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely ready to get into it. Have you been watching the playoffs closely?
Not closely, but I keep up a little bit. I was biased towards the Heat, but now I'm kind of like, just because I don't watch a lot of TV, so that's probably all that's on right now.
That's fair. Okay, I see we got Shayne up here too. Shayne, I just dropped you co-host. We have almost a full panel, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to make sure everybody gets some time to speak, get their thoughts in. But Shayne, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Shayne here, diehard Knicks fan. And I got to be honest, I'm rooting for the Celtics this series. They just, the Warriors, debatably best team of all time with Steph and Clay. But something about Marcus Smart, Tatum, Jaylen Brown, those boys, they hoop, man. But I'm curious what everyone has to say.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of, we could pop around. We can get some thoughts. Also, just want to shout out Polymarket for doing this space with us. Do you guys have some stuff up on Polymarket in regards to the NBA Finals? Is there some different prediction stuff going on there?
Yeah, we have the sort of generic like who will win markets, and then we just put up money line today. We have a pretty diverse array of like who will win markets, and then we're also going to put up some sort of like player bets. Will X event happen, and we'll take suggestions on that.
Okay, sweet, awesome. Well, I'm excited for that. Yeah, for anybody that's not familiar, shout out to Polymarket for kind of helping us put this space together today. We do weekly spaces. We talk about just different topics going on around the world, and Polymarket actually creates prediction markets about those. So, for example, obviously with the NBA Finals, we were going to talk about who everybody in this panel likes to win. We're going to talk about maybe if you can predictions or anything like that, or betting lines. That would be great. To anybody that can't, totally respect that. I know some people have to stay out of those weeds. But to those that can, we'll talk about some of the different stuff they're going to put on. And they always make these really unique prediction markets that you're just not going to find in other places. So we talked about them last week in regards to NFTs. We've talked about them in regards to, I think the Ukraine situation, inflation, and now we're talking NBA Finals. So it just goes to show the range. All right, Hilltop Hoops, we have you up here. Us off with a little bit of your thoughts on how these finals are setting up.
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Pretty well. I think the biggest question right now in this finals is Boston's health. Specifically Robert Williams and Marcus Smart, because Marcus Smart actually just about 10 minutes ago said that his ankle injury is still pretty serious. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, because obviously his defensive mobility and lateral quickness is going to be everything defending Curry in the series, and the importance of, obviously there's no way to stop Steph Curry, but you're going to have to try to slow that down to a certain extent. So I think that's going to be a huge key. And then Robert Williams, his rim protection against Miami. I mean, you could see the difference plain as day when he was healthy versus when he wasn't, and what Bam Adebayo did in that series. And I think that's going to be a huge part of this series when you look at Kevon Looney and what he's able to do, and then as well as Draymond Green. So I think health is the big key, but I'm leaning Boston, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that they're plus odds. When you look at this playoffs and how it's gone, both teams have had a lot of breaks go their way with injury wise, but I think Boston has proven a little bit more over the course of what they've done as opposed to Golden State. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on, but this is going to be a toss-up, and I'm not sold either way.
Yeah, I think you make some great points there for sure. Yeah, Marcus looked like he was having some struggles there in games 6 and 7, especially Rob Williams as well. So definitely some pieces going on. All right, let's pull in some others as well, just for some thoughts. Chris, you're the Hoop Spaces guy. Would love to hear some of your opinions on this. What could be some of the X factors going into the series?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting series. The first one is that the understanding that Boston's defense is elite needs to really take hold here. They are the preeminent defense in the league right now, as constructed from point guard to center. They can guard 1 through 5 in multiple positions. They're 4 points better, in my view, than Golden State's offense. But the issue is that they're not deep and they're not consistent. They are pretty reliant on Marcus Smart to be the point of attack and kind of the emotional weight of the defense. But I think they can really give Golden State problems. The real key, though, is how is Boston going to defend the split action variation that Golden State runs. And you'll see this in several different ways, primarily with Steph off the ball, with Draymond Green in the half-court set, or you'll see it with Steph coming across the half-court line. He'll pass it off to either Klay Thompson or another wing, do a double fake screen, kind of like the Ray Allen action. And then in the screener, instead of actually coming out, will roll backdoor, or he'll fake back and then act as if he's going to crash. And then the actual second screener comes backdoor in what appears to be like almost an illegal screen. That is something that they did consistently great against the Denver, and they did consistently great against Dallas. If Boston can stop that, then it really becomes, hey, is Steph going to be able to beat us and we stop Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole, or will Golden State really be able to overwhelm Boston just by shooting? That, I think, is really, in a nutshell, how close this series is going to be in the finals.
Yeah, definitely that defense versus offense. With Golden State, just that slashing, cutting offense as well puts a lot of pressure on defenses, right, to be able to rotate over. And that's why it's so key with the Boston Five, where you really don't have that weak link unless you have someone that's injured. I guess technically the weak link could be maybe even, like a Derek White or something, just because he's a little bit smaller on defense, but they have a lot of switching. I think personally the X factor in this series coming off of the last series, right, where he was, up and down from some games, but always consistently just a presence and feeling like he was fitting in at all times.
I have one stat for you, and it's dealing with Robert Williams. This will be a benchmark. When switching, the Celtics are giving up 1.15 points per possession with Williams switching as the screener. In every other circumstance, when he is not switching, they're only giving up 0.82, right? That is an immense difference. So the more he stays on the court and the less he switches means the better the defense is going. So if you are a gambler and you don't know how to, adjust after game one, that's the stat that you really want to look at, because the lower that number is, the better Boston's defense is.
Yeah, I think that switching is so key. Okay, I want to get Kendall and Eugene and Jerron and kind of everybody involved in this. So I'll just pop around. Kendall, for anyone that doesn't know, Kendall Baker is one of that for their sports newsletter. I'm sure that you've been all over this, covering different pieces and areas and aspects of it. What should people be paying attention to? And then specifically, if you've touched on any of the betting areas and the betting lines, I'm very curious if that's something that you've looked into as well.
What's up, everybody? Appreciate you having me. Well, first of all, I just got to share this stat because I'm over here putting together a little preview, and this stat's pretty mind blowing. So, the Warriors roster has combined 123 NBA Finals games appearances. The Celtics roster has 0. And we went back and looked. The only larger discrepancy was the Bulls over the Jazz in the '97 Finals. So, I mean, that's like the definition of a crazy stat in my mind. And I mean, we'll see whether that plays a factor or not. But I mean, on a simple level, that experience is it's a pretty wide gap. And then, sorry, what was the specific question?
Yeah, have you looked into the betting ones at all? Betting markets in general?
I was about to do that later today. What is the current line? Do we know?
Yeah, let's go ahead and put it up. I'm
One
just going to use.
I think. Let's see. Hold on, I'll pull it up too.
Yeah,
Golden State's minus 160 on most books, and Boston's around plus 140, plus 130.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Let's see. Yeah, tonight or tomorrow minus 3.5.
They moved. They started minus 145.
Yeah, I kind of like. I mean, yeah, that's about what I would expect. One thing I'd say, I mean, again, I'm just putting together a bunch of numbers over here, so a bunch of random numbers are on top of mind. But I think I saw like ESPN's whatever weight we want to put into this. Let me see, ESPN. So the lineup is the Warriors tonight, and then ESPN basketball. Sorry guys, basketball power index chance to win the finals. Celtics 86%. That is another stat that stood out to me. So just sharing some higher level stuff.
Perfect. Yeah, I just went ahead and
who's gonna be Finals MVP if the Celtics win?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, Tatum's the obvious answer. I feel like
I want to get a contrarian take though.
Yeah,
obviously,
Al Horford is plus 10,000. By the way,
I think Marcus Smart, I'd say, is that archetype of like a potential. If he shoots it fairly well for the series, scores decently well, but like he'll be one of those guys that maybe he has like an absurd amount of steals, has a huge impact on the defensive end, kind of an Andre Iguodala-esque winner. That would be my contrarian take, because I feel like he's probably, in terms of favorites to win MVP, I haven't looked, but Tatum's obviously, for the Celtics, Tatum's obviously 1, Jaylen Brown 2, and I guess Smart would be 3.
Yeah, let's speak to Jaylen there for a second. So we have Jerron Love in here. Jerron is a elite athlete, basketball, and close friends as well with Jaylen. So we've spent some time together. We were actually down in Miami recently, So, Jerron, walk us through. I don't know. I mean, you said you chatted with Jalen after their win to go to the finals. What does Jalen have in the bag here to surprise? Has he talked with you through anything? He was also injured when you go back to the beginning of the playoffs. Has he, fully recovered from that? And, going back to this last series, it seemed like, there were games where he was on fire, having games where, anytime there's more than 2 to 3 dribbles, the ball was going elsewhere. So I don't know. I think that you've been to even some of the games. What's your take here, and how can Jalen, pull through to be potentially an MVP or an MVP for the finals candidate?
Yeah, those are all good points. I think that first off, Jalen's head, and like I said, like I've been close to the team, and I know that Al has never been to a championship, and like the stat says, none of them has ever been to the finals. So that type of fight, and that type of what their road to having to get here, that type of chemistry, you can say has a different advantage with the Warriors having all that experience. And really, it's just, and like I said to him, I said, like, this is like 20 years of 6 a.m. workouts all in 4 games and a lot of sacrifice. And when you sum it up like that, and this is your first time here, and they're like all on that same mindset, it's something that could be super powerful. And I think, Kendall, that stat that you referred to about the 86%, the last 10 times the Celtics faced the Warriors, they won 7 out of the 10 times. And I know that's in the regular season, but it's not like they're facing a huge juggernaut that they've never beaten the past 2 or 3 seasons. So they're used to beating this team in the regular season. I know the championship is a whole other deal. As far as when he's going off the dribble, there's times to where he even surprises me with how quick he makes moves and that pull back through the legs. And there's times to where he may be needing some more pace to his game. And that just falls in a line to who's the type of defense strategy that's falling against him and the team that he's playing. But I'm pretty sure that the wall, and it's going to be a full-on dogfight for this whole series.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't expect anything less. Kendall, looks like you got some.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like as he said, and I'll just reiterate, like I think going into the series at least, and obviously the narrative to a series, a final series, can change in one game, but going into it, I do think those two stats, the fact that the Celtics have beaten them 7 out of 10 or whatever it was, the numbers suggest they have an 86% chance to win. I don't know what this ESPN metric is, but that's high. That on one hand, and then the 100, what was it, 123 finals games appearances to 0. Like those are the two stories going in. On paper, the Celtics are the better team apparently, according to a lot of things, and past results being one of them. And then, but does that lack of experience, does that help them in certain ways? Does that hurt them in other ways? I think that's just the series to me going in simple terms.
I think that Klay Thompson, and we also have to take into account like the journeys to get here. Klay Thompson came off 2 ACL, so I think he has that same hunger that he's back and he's gonna, control the energy on the court in that sense. But as far as the experience, I mean, these guys played basketball for a living. Now, it may be a little bit jittery. It can go either way. They can come out super fired up, or they can be a little nervous. And I just don't see them being nervous as far as this group being nervous going into this. I just don't see it.
I definitely agree with you. I think that, a big thing which we haven't mentioned yet has been Udoka, right? And the style and approach which he came with to the Celtics. And I think that's what's removed that nervousness is,
100%.
Ime makes it that if you are nervous, you are wrong, right? It's like you need to be in a confident mindset at all times.
They've also played 2 game 7s and won both. So,
haven't lost back-to-back games in the playoffs, right?
Right. So the finals, you hear from players all the time. Finals is a different beast, but as we said, anything can happen in sports. The classic narrative is if you don't have experience, you're going to crack under pressure. But there's plenty of examples of teams who go the complete opposite way and are playing a little freer, a little hungrier. So who knows? But I think that's a great kind of narrative going in. Just that huge experience difference.
Wait, I think, and I think a lot of people overlook it, but the Boston Celtics are in the same position that the Detroit Pistons were when they played the Los Angeles Lakers back in '89. And I think sometimes you can be young, and that actually is a benefit because you don't know any better, and that the nerves don't get to you. And I think we really need to give Boston some credit here. And I think that they are pretty much in the same dominant position that a lot of the prognosticators think.
I love it. I want to bring in Ronnie
Like
and
that.
Eugene as well. So, Jerron, you had something else there?
No, I was just saying I like that position. And I see the how that could be applicable.
I love it. So we've got Ronnie on here. Ronnie, really cool that we have you on here because actually most of the spaces that we do are finance spaces. So it's great that you are a CFA. I'm happy to get you onto the sports space for those that aren't familiar with Ronnie. Drafted number 2 overall going into the NFL back in the 2005 NFL draft, 10-year vet. So great to have you on here. I know you said you were leaning Heat, Celtics, Warriors. So kind of walk us through the situation and just your perspective on it going into it. If you're leaning one way or the other, who might take game 1? Do you think this could go 7 games? We'd just love to get your thoughts and then popping over to Eugene after.
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at it from, an athlete perspective, obviously I never made it to not the finals, but, the equivalent in football is the championship or even to the playoffs. I only played in, 2 playoff games. But as you look at it, I think someone mentioned it earlier, one of the key things is, the experience of Golden State. Like, obviously they've been there. They're tried and true. They've won a few, Steph, Clay. But then when you look at the potential of the Celtics, that could be a positive. I know a lot of people say that's a negative, but a lot of times you don't know how you should feel in those situations because you've never been there. And so you're so eager to get a championship. And so that could work in their favor, in terms of lack of experience, but more of the motivation of, well, we need to get our first one. Whereas some of the guys on Golden State, I would assume that they wouldn't because they have a coach who's obviously been in those situations as well, that can handle that and mentally, prepare them for that and not getting, that hangover of a championship of we've done this before. And so, I think as you look at all of those things, we're talking who's going to be the MVP. I think if whoever on Steph Curry, because of their shooting abilities, Clay is arguably best shooter in the game's ever seen. But, when you look at that team, Draymond Green is the facilitator. And, a lot of action happens off of, what he does. And so for that, if you can defend him well, force him to make some turnovers, because a lot of their play is predicated on screens and moving without the ball. So if those guys, in terms of the Celtics, can be physical, we see that's where Steph struggles the most is when teams are physical with him with all. Then that gives them an opportunity when you're talking about, the Celtics. But so it's just so many factors. If I had to lean towards one team, I'll say, for me, it's still Golden State. I'd prefer, I'm a fan. I like for the Celtics to win. But, when you're looking at all those things, I think they have the deeper team. And coming off of this series, the Celtics may be a little exhausted because, even though they had the better team, they went 7 games, and you saw at the end what a lapse in, mindset can do. They could have lost that game. Jimmy Butler comes down, he makes that 3-pointer. And so, with those factors, I think the key guy for Golden State is, defending. A lot of times Draymond Green as the facilitator, not allowing him to manage the game and have a big impact without scoring the basketball. And then for the Celtics, Jalen, I think he was a little banged up. You could kind of see, but toward the end of that, I want him to be more aggressive. Because Clay's not the same Clay that we saw a few years ago. You look at how he comes off, he doesn't have as much lift in his jumpers. He doesn't move as well without the ball, coming off of some of those screens. And so that's a plus for Boston. So there's a lot to go into it. And, obviously the playoffs are a game of cat and mouse and matchups when it comes to, NBA. And so we're going to see from a game in and out situation who makes the best adjustments.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to take a focus on Draymond, who we saw what happened to that team when Draymond was out, right? He could be the most important player on that team. We haven't mentioned the X factor yet. In my thought, I think a little bit of the X factor here for both sides is Jordan Poole. I think Jordan Poole comes up big on offense and then also gets hunted on defense. So I think it's really how each team makes the most out of him is a super big factor for this. Okay, someone else might have unmuted for a second there. Eugene, what's on, man?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on.
So listen, as a season ticket holder for the Miami Heat, I don't have a horse in this race anymore. So I'm just hoping for a good game. I want 7 games and, close games. I look at the Golden State roster and I can't really pick. I don't have any clients on Golden State or Boston Celtics. So I can't go out and start picking champions because, in case I got to work with one of the guys, they'll be pissed that I picked against their team. But I think Boston is tougher. I think Boston is harder. I think they grind it out more. I think that if Boston keeps the games under 100, 105, they're going to be able to win those games. But if they start running with Golden State, I think they will get blown out. And I think a lot of people are talking about Steph and Clay. I think Andrew Wiggins is the one wild card in the whole playoffs. If he's dropping 25-5, right, Golden State is going to be tough to beat. Because Boston, I've watched Boston, when they played Miami very closely. And, there's a 3-headed monster with them, right? As you got Smart, you got Tatum, you got Jaylen Brown. And after that, it's not much offense coming after that. If Golden State's dropping, Steph's putting up 25, 18, Wiggins dropping 17, 18, Bulls dropping 17, 18, Looney, Draymond, it's going to be hard. You got to keep him very, very slow, very methodical, boring game. You stay in the 90s and 100, I think Boston can pull it off. If Boston starts running with them, I think it's not going to be good. That's just kind of my opinion.
Can I just add something about Wiggins? Yeah. I think he's. I was going to say earlier, he's to me the factor of the whole playoffs or the whole series. To say for defensive reasons, like he's kind of bordering on like elite defender at this point. He's going to be guarding Tatum, probably Brown a little bit too. I just think that's a really fascinating player to watch here. You remember how hyped he was coming out of high school. His NBA career is a little, winding road, and now all of a sudden he has a chance on this NBA final stage guarding the best player. Like, I don't know if he kind of takes his game to another level, and I think particularly defensively, that changes the whole series.
One wild card in the whole series, in my opinion.
I'll agree to Wiggins over Poole.
Wiggins can change this series, no doubt, if he comes correct.
I think these markets are so interesting because it sounds like, we're kind of split here, but right now I'm looking, so I don't know how much liquidity is. Okay, so I see there's about $14,000 of liquidity. So this just opened recently, right, Shayne? On the for game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4.
I actually don't really follow this corner of Polymarket.
Yeah, that was recently.
Harry's better to comment on it.
Yeah, Henry, I saw you unmuted.
Harry, or Henry, but Harry.
I was just saying
Henry would be great for this.
That market was recently added. The one you're looking at, who will win each game, I think. But I just wanted to pose a question. Speaking of MVP, if Tatum goes and brings home a ring to Boston and, gets finals MVP, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? And then on the other end, if Curry gets his 5th ring and wins, I see the laughing emoji, and wins finals MVP and gets his 5th ring, is he in the talk for best of all time?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
How
no
will
to
this
both.
affect LeBron?
Steph Curry didn't make the playoffs without Klay Thompson. Let's call it a spade a spade.
I just held the
never
space.
won anything without Pippen.
I just held the space with the top 10 in mind, talking about Steph Curry. Steph Curry's ultimate argument is the impact on total game, not anything he's done on the court. Anybody who's watched the history of basketball understands that that's his argument. Jason Tatum would need to do way more about Hall of Famer. There are plenty of players who have succeeded and become Hall of Famers without it. It just helps. It makes the resume better. It'll get him ahead of his peers, but it won't make him a first ballot if it's only one. If he does it twice with the Finals MVP, that tends to make you a first ballot guaranteed. There's been a couple in the past that you had to go to the second ballot. And I before I get out of here, I wanted to give you guys the MVP numbers here, top 10 and value plays. Andrew Wiggins is actually number 10. He's plus 4,100 on FanDuel. Grant Williams is plus 40,000 on PointsBet. Klay Thompson is plus 1,600 on BetRivers. Draymond is plus 18 on DraftKings. Al Horford plus 12,000 on DraftKings. Jordan Poole 3,000 on DraftKings. Jaylen Brown 1,100. Marcus Smart 45, both on DraftKings. FanDuel, Curry is plus 120. Tatum is plus 150. Your two best value, Marcus Smart for Boston, and whoever said Jordan Poole for Golden State.
Yeah, I
There we
think
go.
can I add on to that?
Oh, you, Ronnie.
I think Steph Curry, we're talking about best ever. He's not an individual player. Like he's probably the greatest shooter of all time in NBA history, but majority of his points come off of screens and a lot of other actions that don't pertain to just him being a one-on-one dominant player. But then when you talk about like this NBA, like the Finals MVP, that's about consistency. We talk about Wiggins. He has all the ability in the world, but the thing that I've seen, from great players to good players and successful players is the players that are good at home, but not necessarily as much on the road. And so that's going to be the challenge for Wiggins is, how well does he play in Boston? You talk about, I think the ghost of all the guys that have come through Boston, I think that atmosphere, some guys don't handle that well. You're talking about their game traveling. And so I think that's one of the things you talk about consistency. But one of the things is, as we look at this, it's Steph Curry's, it's Jason Tatum's, it's certain guys' MVP to lose, because those guys, the other guys have to do so much to even put themselves in that conversation. And it has to be a 6 or 7 game effect that they have for them to even get the MVP. Steph can go through it, have a Steph Curry average playoffs, and I think he would win as long as they would win the series, unless, Draymond or somebody does something extraordinary that they don't normally do.
Well, I think an interesting point to that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Andre Iguodala is not currently, is he back on the Warriors? Okay, I was going to say, I guess he's on the Warriors, but outside of Iguodala, there's nobody playing the series that actually won Finals MVP before. Steph's never won a Finals MVP. 2 went to Durant, 1 went to Iguodala. Famous quote, Max Kellerman, "Give me Iguodala." So pretty much, it's hard to tell exactly like which way it could go. I think Steph, it's always interesting. Because
man, thank God Max Kellerman is not on First Take anymore, man. That guy was fucking obnoxious.
Somebody had to be, right? I love it. All right, Chris, appreciate you being on. I want to work in AlexHoops as well. I don't know if you've had a chance to speak yet. Henry, do you have something else there?
Yeah, I think I have a good question that, if Alex wants to hop on and touch on. One of the things that's been kind of talked about is drafting a team versus buying a team, and kind of how that impacts, everything from the culture of the team to, just winning games. And I think one of the things we've seen this year, clearly with the Warriors and the Celtics, both are teams that drafted their way to the finals. Obviously you pick up key role players and free agents. You can't draft a full roster. But I think it's a pretty unique finals where, the Celtics had such a tough road to get here. Even though they swept the Nets, it's never easy playing, the best scorer of all time in KD, right? Fought their way through. And then on the other side, you have the Warriors, which are such a, experienced team and who don't really need that tough road because they've been there before. And, both teams have drafted, both teams have that kind of culture. So, does it matter drafting a team versus, kind of buying your way there?
And by the way, not only did the Celtics draft their team, but they drafted their team by, like, Tatum and Brown both came from that trade with the Nets, who were the exact example of buying a team. So it's just the fact that they were on the other end of that, it makes it even funnier.
Exactly. Poetry in motion. Justice
Do
is
the
served.
players care though now? Like the game is so different. Like
I don't think so. It's just for fans, like just an interesting narrative, I think, going in.
I think some people do care. A lot of the commentators seem to care. A lot of the people who've been around the game for decades and decades. I think the younger fans care less. People like myself, we become more enamored with players than teams. Like me personally, honestly, I grew up a Wizards fan, so there wasn't much team enthusiasm for the last 20 years. So most of it's been around players, right? And looking at individual players. And when Curry came out and started lighting it up, it's hard to hate on Steph Curry, right? It's like, hey, there's a guy I'm literally 6'2", 180. Like Steph Curry's out there doing this. It's very like relatable and stuff with that. And then there's other players that come out, and I look at them, lighting it up in different areas. Big fan of, I kind of mentioned it before, like Jordan Poole. I can't just keep pulling dub people. I'll root for Jalen. I can't say I love the Celtics, but I'll root for Jalen for Jerron. Boston sports in general, man. Gosh, those fans. But I'll root for Jalen. And then there's some other players too. I think it's just different guys. When Shaq was out there, right? Love Shaq. Just love the enthusiasm, the way he played, different stuff like that. Doesn't mean I necessarily was going for whatever team he was on. But yeah, Ronnie, I think it's kind of transitioned across decades.
yeah, because I think it's the stars. It's okay for them to leave now, like that where that used to not happen. Even with the organizations, they kept those stars, whereas now it's more business. I don't know, in my opinion.
No, you're 100% right. I think it's definitely the NBA in particular, as you guys are saying, it's such an individually driven sport anyway. People follow players more than teams in many respects. A lot of younger fans in particular. I do think though it's just an interesting kind of narrative going into the series. Like every organization is different, of course, and even the Celtics and Warriors are different in many ways. But like there is a certain culture I think that's bred when a team is at least their core is there for a long time. When there's obviously every team's trying to win the championship, but when there's kind of a bigger picture, longer term goal there that you could have been building over years, I do think comes out in the court for sure.
If the Warriors win, are they of all time?
Ooh, they're tied.
Certainly a debate. And then obviously
I say they tie.
And if the Celtics win, they got one more title than the Lakers. So there's a lot of history on the line here.
Yeah, I think that the Chicago Bulls and that run, I think that the best team, because they did have that season where they had the highest NBA record or close to getting that. Am I wrong?
I think they hit it.
The Warriors, yeah, they have the highest. That's year they lost to LeBron.
So exactly, and I'm surprised that nobody's mentioning Draymond Green 2.0 and Grant Williams.
He's got to work. He's got to work on the consistency first.
I don't know if we could get.
I think that he's coming into the series looking to make a name for himself, and I think that is coming with threes, having that 20-point game in Miami, and him having opportunities to play against someone that his game models.
I think that kind of contradicts it though, because Draymond's game is not shooting 18 threes, right? It's a little bit different, and then also it's like really on the assists. I think that's where Draymond shines. It's like taking the over on Draymond assists. That was a great bet for a few years there throughout the playoffs. The man was just putting up triple doubles kind of throughout. Also, one of my favorite finals bets, if anybody's looking at this, the over on free throws for people like Curry and Tatum and all these, they always start out under double digits for some reason the first game or two, and these guys are just getting smacked on their way to the basket. And so they just always end up, especially if you have Curry, who's hitting like 95% of his free throws, it typically leans nicely. So just a little tidbit there. All right, Alex, I don't know if you got a chance to speak before. I think a couple questions were thrown out. Just wanted to pull you into the conversation.
Yeah, I do. We talked about it a little bit ago, but talking about buying your team versus building your team through the draft. I think one underrated aspect of the whole idea of building your team through the draft as opposed to quote unquote buying your team or your super team is when you build your team through the draft and through, smart trades and not necessarily selling the farm and your young talent to try and get a championship, is you maintain. And I think that's something not only Golden State has done really well, but Boston as well. They weren't, trading important young pieces to try and go out and get a superstar. I mean, one of the most impactful trades that they made this year was for Derek White, no one's going to sit here and say that Derek White is some all-star caliber player or this superstar that's going to borderline guarantee your team. They didn't get him with the idea that he was going to be the third star next to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They got him because he's a glue guy. He's a guy who is going to come in and have an immediate impact, be able to be a connector within your offense, play really, really good defense. And, he's not the best shooter in the world. He's not always super efficient, but the things that he does for your team that aren't always going to show up in the stat sheet are super important. And I think they're kind of a case study, both of these teams. And, on one hand, you can go the Nets approach and, sell your young talent. They had guys like Jarrett Allen, Karis LeVert, they had D'Angelo Russell, and, they traded these guys to try and upgrade the roster as much as they could. They went out and got Kevin Durant, they got Kyrie Irving, then they traded for James Harden. And, right now it looks like that didn't necessarily work out for them, but from the Warriors and the Celtics perspective, I mean, this trade the Warriors really made was for Andrew Wiggins. And at the time, no one was sitting there and saying Andrew Wiggins is an absolute game changer for them. Everyone was kind of doubting it. They looked at that contract in a very negative light. Andrew Wiggins, he's never going to be what he was advertised to be when he was drafted, all these different things. And now, look, he's one of the most important players on this roster. And I just think both of these teams are a super interesting case study in how you don't have to go out and always trade for, the best of the best in the league. Granted, in the Warriors case, they have the benefit of having two of the greatest shooters ever. And then the Celtics have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are both very, very good young stars. But I've enjoyed seeing these two teams who didn't take the quote-unquote easy route ultimately make it to the finals. And I think that's a really exciting kind of underrated narrative going on here.
What do we think about the coaching matchup?
Ooh.
I'm so excited just based on all the different ways that Boston can play. They're not limited in their approach. They have Robert Williams, who is more of your traditional rim protector, not really going to stretch the floor per se, but he offers, a fair share on offense, probably more than people give him credit for. But they don't need to play that way with a traditional big man. They've got Al Horford and Grant Williams who can kind of operate in this small ball front court. The Warriors obviously are operating with Draymond Green as a primary interior defender for them. Rightfully so. He's one of the greatest defenders ever. And they also have Kevon Looney, who, is kind of that parallel to Rob Williams, more traditional, more of a rim running big. He's going to operate as your interior protector. He's not necessarily going to be guarding 1 through 5 on any given night. And so from a coaching perspective, there's so many different ways that these teams can try and exploit each other's weaknesses. And obviously the players are the big draw here. We're going to be excited to watch Steph Curry and Jason Tatum duel it out. But really, I think a lot of this game is going to be played from the sidelines with the coaching approach and the X's and O's and how these coaches try to pick apart the other team.
I just want to say one thing as far as the coaches. Greg Popovich is kind of like the godfather for both of these coaches because Kerr played on the Spurs when Greg Popovich was there. Udoka played for Greg Popovich, and then Udoka was the assistant for Greg Popovich. Kerr was assistant for the USA team, and now they're meeting up at the finals. So that's like a little bit of the context as far as their journeys to the finals as head coaches.
Yeah. Also want to put out there, it would be interesting was to go ahead and win one. He would then be part of both dynasties to do 6 championships in 8 years. So kind of a little bit of concurrent history throughout those. Real quick, I want to bring it back for just a second before we go and we bring in John W. Rich, Sr., who we have up here with us. I have pinned a couple of pieces to the top of the space. So for anyone that's not familiar with pinning, you could just scroll up the top of your space. You'll see a few things up there. I pinned some of these markets that I'm looking at, just keeping an eye on. Polymarket for kind of helping put together this space, supporting this space, doing a lot of stuff within the Twitter community and so many different areas of, finance, art, history, what's going on around the world, live events, predictions. So building out these prediction models. And I just think it's still curious that they, the betting markets, at least on Polymarket, are leaning the Warriors for all 4 of the first games. If you think the Celtics are going to win any of the first 4 games, you can actually get plus. And then for the actual series overall, they do have that up as well. And that is also going to be leaning towards the Warriors. So you can get plus money on everything Celtics right now. If that's something that you're interested in, you definitely have that opportunity. That's just one of the areas. They do markets on so many different stuff. We were doing them last week, kind of talking about inflation and just all different things. They even have them on coronavirus and chess and NFTs. So really just a great grouping there for anyone that wants to go ahead and check that out. And all those links are in the top. So I do recommend you go and click on them now. Before I bring in John W. Rich Sr., because this talk has been awesome. And by the way, big shout out to the panelists that come on here. My first space that I'm doing with Ronnie and Hilltop, Alex, Jerron, Henry. This is awesome having you guys on here. I've done some spaces with Kendall and Eugene and others, but great to meet you all. And hope we get you back on more of these spaces. I'm a big, passionate sports fan. And, Jerron, hopefully I'll make it to one of these games with you maybe. We'll figure it out during the finals. But to be able to talk like this, to get insights, I love it. Absolutely. Harry or Shane, anything else you want to add on the Polymarket side of things in regards to the betting markets before we continue into this for a little bit more? Okay. Sounds like it's all been said. So once again, that is all up there to go ahead and check out. Let's go ahead and bring in John W. Rich Sr. What do you got some thoughts on this series? We've been talking all different aspects of it.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out that I was actually there in 1891 in spring. James Naismith invented basketball, and I was actually an angel investor in basketball. And not just the NBA, I just mean all basketball. I'm a early investor, so anytime you dribble a basketball or anything, I'm getting a small royalty on that. So just wanted to add that. And you can see that on my LinkedIn. I put that I'm a angel investor in basketball. With that said, I think if the Celtics want to have a chance, they should go back to old school basketball. I think they should forget 3-pointers. Just forget about those. Back when I played, we just had 2-pointers. I would also go back to the running hook shot. I think we need to bring that back. And I think also, some of these jump shots are a little too show-offy, especially with Curry and Klay Thompson. I think we should go back to like the basic jump shot where you just stand on the ground and you just shoot it with 2 hands. Like they call it the grandma shot now, but I think the Celtics would have a little more success if they went back to that. I've been sending some emails to the coaches on my AOL email, but they haven't gotten back to me yet.
I think it's funny. Something super, I think, would be since we have a little bit left, to be like if all the speakers or whoever wants to can kind of go around and give their hottest takes. Doesn't have to be, particularly NBA Finals related. I just think it'd be pretty funny to kind of hear, everyone's hottest takes. And I guess, I'll go first. So everybody remembers youngest MVP of all time, arguably most athletic point guard of all time, Derrick Rose on the Bulls. If LeBron would have gone to the Bulls and not the Heat, would have been a better dynasty than him going to the Heat. Just wanted to drop that little hot take, but kind of hearing everybody's hot takes.
Ooh, don't get me started there. LeBron on the
I'm
Heat
just
is like
saying.
a whole thing. I mean, Wade breaking down early, Bosh breaking down early, what could have been. Some hot takes. I mean, I like the hot takes in sports in general, but I would love them on the NBA Finals too, because we had some hot takes earlier here on MVP. So maybe there's some other thoughts. Kendall, I feel like you're a hot take kind of guy here and there. What are you thinking?
Good question. About the final specifically, huh? I mean, I guess I'll just double down on it's a kind of a lukewarm take, but I'm just going to double down on my Marcus Smart for MVP take. How about that?
Okay, Marcus Smart for MVP. What are the odds on that?
Lukewarm. Sorry, what'd you say?
What are the odds on Marcus Smart for MVP? I think we heard them earlier. What were they, like,
I forget.
4,000?
I guess he's best odds, fifth? Probably sixth.
Around 3,500, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. It's definitely.
I think in the finals, you know, a guy like that, because him shooting well is kind of a wild card, but I think a guy like that can make a difference in many different ways. And just like, when you're going to the finals like this, everybody knows you're that. And I think just that'll be a big part of his story this series, assuming they win, is just like what kind of impact did he have outside of the box score. So yeah,
I think it's very difficult to win that though with no box score. Yeah, Jerron.
I think. Does anybody know what Al Horford is plus or minus for the first game? I'll take him over 12.
Al Horford 12
or
points?
14. No, I'll take him over 12. I think his discipline over the years and this being his first game in the finals, I think his three is going to fall and he's going to bump and get to the line and get over 12.
All right, I'm pulling up the live odds right now so that I just have this in front of me and I can kind of speak a little bit better to this while we're talking here. So give me just a second to go ahead and get this. All right, basketball live odds. Are they putting up? I see just like basic featured stuff, but let's see. Okay, so they have Finals MVP up. Let's go. NBA Finals player props. Ooh, interesting. They even have like highest points per game average and a couple of other pieces like that. So there could be some interesting things here. But yeah, I mean, I like the hot take there. I'll take it. Al Horford, you said over game 1 points, over 12.
Over 12. I'm taking that all day.
Okay. I don't see the actual line yet put up. If anybody has that, I think that would be pretty interesting to look at. I'm just seeing the actual game right now. I'm not seeing for specific. Let's see, player threes, player points. Here we go. Player points. Al Horford. The line is 10.5. So you actually
there we go.
Yeah, you're getting some points here. So you would take over 10.5.
Definitely.
Minus 122.
Definitely.
So all right, you're paying a little bit of money there, but I do hear it. Ronnie, got some hot takes for the NBA Finals?
When it comes to which part of it, is it in terms of like the MVP or just overall?
Yeah, you can give me anything. You can give me someone's player rebounds, player threes, first basket.
I think first basket. I see this. I think Celtics to score first. I know you probably do that. I think Horford probably win the tip. They probably score first. I mean, it has to be less than 105 points, to give the Celtics their best opportunity. The question is, where are the Celtics going to get their three-point shooting from outside of Al Horford? Occasionally Tatum takes a couple, but none of those guys shoot threes at a high volume like that or at a high percentage. And so the question is, how often does those three-pointers, does it shoot Boston out of the game, like scoring at a high volume? So the question is, their defense, or I guess the statement is, their defense has to be a lot better than the Warriors' offense.
I've got a quick little hot take on the series as well. It's just more of a question. I think for you guys to answer too. I think Jordan Poole could be a little bit of a liability in this series. When you look at the way that Boston attacks guards his size defensively, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson last round was completely unplayable. Grayson Allen against those type of matchups. I think if he's not hitting his threes, he could be a little bit of a liability for the Warriors. And then earlier I heard someone talk about how the Celtics have a winning record versus the Warriors or whatever. They're actually the only team since Steve Kerr took over to have a winning record against the Warriors. So they love this matchup. Marcus Smart has shut down Curry in the past, which I don't think that'll happen in the finals, but he's probably about as good of a matchup this side of Drew Holiday that you could have on Steph Curry. So when they have not lost 2 in a row in this playoff run, I think they're battle tested. I think Tatum's played in 5 or 6 game 7s already in his career. Same for Brown. So I just think that they're ready for this moment. And I don't think that anything the Warriors are going to throw at them is going to scare them. So I actually think Gary Payton, if he's healthy, could actually be closing some games for the Warriors, just when you look at what he can bring them defensively.
Is Gary Payton going to be healthy? I thought he fractured his.
He's a game. I believe he's.
Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't realize that. Well, if they have Gary Payton back, I mean, that'd obviously be huge. They could really use him defensively. All right, question: Do we think Marcus Smart tries to go after Curry again? Is that stirring the pot? Does anybody get it? All right, Eugene, what about you? Any hot takes here?
Here's my hot take. Golden State averages under 100 points for the series over the course of whatever games the series goes. Wait, not over. Under 100. Sorry. Under 100 points.
So you're really leaning into defense here?
I think that the only chance, that if Boston is sitting down and goes, we don't have as many weapons as they do. What's our competitive advantage? And our competitive advantage is the size, right? So he's got Golden State. I just looked him up as loony at 6'9", right? And Boston
has 6'9".
Yeah, Boston has Robert Williams, Horford. They got Grant Williams. They got a couple other guys. Golden State has Poole and beehiiv coming off the bench, right? Like Boston runs and guns. I mean, not Boston. Golden State runs and guns. So the only way you have a competitive advantage is just to grind the game out, slow it down. Don't let them get in the rhythm. And if they win 98 to 95 kind of a game. So I think that if we anybody here likes Boston, plus 130, plus 3.5 in the game, I think you just kind of have to go with the unders and assume that Golden State has to average under 100 points for the series per game.
I like the hot take. I definitely could see the defense being there. What do you think, Jerron?
I say let's go to that. We need that under 100, and that means that the whole coaching staff and everybody was locked in 100%. It's just a road to the championship.
Yeah, a lot of interesting storylines here, just kind of coming throughout. I believe the last time that Golden State played against Boston in a NBA Finals was in the 1960s. If I had to put a date on it, I'm going to guess like 1964, 67, right around there. That was one of the last times. It really should have happened again, but both teams couldn't seem to make it back. Outside of that, let's see. Stock market news. Are you listening to any earnings calls? Or are you able to chime in with some takes here on basketball? I know he was like going back and forth. There's a bunch of earnings that came out today with stock earnings. So we'll see if we can get him in here. All right, Hilltop Hoops to kind of bring you back in on this. So we've had a couple of hot takes here I'd love to get your thoughts on. Eugene kind of playing the under here. Some others thinking maybe even do Marcus Smart as MVP. What do you like? What do you don't like?
Yeah, I would probably stay away from the Smart MVP. I think just because of health, and also the fact that I think Tatum has to be the MVP for Boston if they're going to win this series. Just when you look at the way their offense is designed and the way that they like to hunt mismatches specifically, I think that Tatum is going to be a lock for around 25 to 30 a night. Even if he's not shooting the ball well, he gets to the line. He just shoots a ton of times anyway. So I would probably lean away from Smart just because also he's going to be expending a lot of energy defensively trying to chase Curry around. So I don't think his offensive production is going to be quite as high as people might think. And also, like you guys said, this is going to be a grind out series. So I completely agree with leaning under in the series most of the time, just from the fact that the general public likes to bet on the over usually. And so I think a lot of people are going to think, oh, we got Warriors, a lot of good shooters on each team, so might as well bet the over. But when you look at the defensive production, these are actually the number 1 and 2 defensive rated teams in the entire league. And that finals matchup hasn't happened. Usually you have to be top 10 defensively to make the finals, but it hasn't been 1 and 2 in a long time. And these two teams are 1 and 2 in defensive efficiency. So I definitely agree with the under.
Okay, interesting. Hey, just to note, everybody, we have about 10 minutes left on this sports space, 10 to 15. If you do have to dip out early, just feel free to throw up a hand, and I'm happy to go over to you for any final comments. I went back for just a second to what Henry was saying, or I think it was Henry. Someone else might have pointed out beforehand when we were talking about these homegrown teams not made through trade, right? And we were kind of going over these different pieces. And I think you have to look at the Warriors, and I'm almost a little surprised at how it worked out, right? You go throughout the season, there just was not really a big that was super reliable. You had the James Wiseman fiasco, and we'll see if that gets any better moving forward. You had Draymond kind of in and out, but the 5 throughout an entire game. And then you, of course, have Kevon Looney. And with Looney, I thought he was going to kind of show up and be, not so useful once you got into games 3, 4, 5, maybe of some of these series. But instead, he really showed up, especially in the last series. But the same problem with that comes down to, we're looking at the Warriors and, you can applaud them. You can say, hey, look at them, right? They had this opportunity. They had Wiggins, I don't know, was it the 7th pick, the 14th, something like that, or Wiggins 7 and 11. And they could have taken that, flipped it for some other all-star, tried to maybe pull a move like LeBron did, right, with Russell Westbrook and all that. But instead they stood there, right? And now you have Kuminga, who looks like a very strong up-and-coming talent, Moses Moody, who's getting minutes in the playoffs, might even get minutes in the finals. And then, of course, we have some of these bigs that are still holding up. So I think it's an interesting situation there. But at the same time, while we're saying it worked out, my question is, did it? And I'll kind of propose this to anyone on the panel who wants to talk to it. Maybe Eugene, you want to kind of bounce off of this. My question is, have the Warriors really faced a opponent like the Celtics have in the playoffs? You look at first round, they played against Nikola Jokic. I'm not sure they played against anyone else, really, too many other people on that team. I only really know 1 or 2 other people, I think, on that team currently on the Nuggets, and I pretty avidly watch basketball. Then in the second round, they went against Memphis, and that was going back and forth, but, Ja did go out, I think, for a game or 2 there towards the end. It just seemed like, again, the Memphis team, a lot of promise, but a very young team, and kind of talked about having at least some experience. The Celtics might not have finals experience, but they have playoff experience, that's for sure. And then in the third round, they kind of caught some luck here as the Suns fizzled out, and they ended up with this Mavs team, which is winning when their threes go in and just, not getting even close when their threes don't go in, and they just live or die by it. And when you live or die by the 3 and you're playing against the Warriors, it's not a great strategy. So with that, the aisle, you have the Celtic, looking at it going, we went against the KD Nets and we swept them. And yes, game 1 was pretty much a miracle win, but those other 3 weren't too far off. Round 2, I get it, Middleton was out, but still played Giannis, still played against Drew Holiday, still played against a very feasible finals team, although they did definitely get lucky there with Drew. And then this Miami team, which is really hard to judge, right? Jimmy Butler has pulled out some crazy playoff games, Bam in there, but then also a lot of injuries. But still, you would look at it and say, hey, maybe they kind of ran a gauntlet versus Golden State. I haven't seen Golden State even come close to faltering throughout these series. I don't know if they were ever down in any of these series. Not sure. I'm trying to think back, but I don't think that they were in any of the series leading up to it. It kind of feels like a bit of a smooth run where they're coming to a much tougher team. And I would agree that this match up very well against them as well, when you kind of look at the matchup here from like a defensive perspective. So, Eugene, I put a lot out there with 1, how they built the team, and then 2, the actual difficulty of the schedule up to here. We'd love to get your thoughts on that. Or Hilltop, if you want to come in, or Ronnie. Anybody's welcome to kind of bounce off of that.
Yeah, I think those are great points. When you look at the fact that, like you said, the Warriors have gotten a lot of breaks injury-wise in this playoff run, and honestly, the Celtics have too, though. So I think when you look back every year, that's a little bit, that kind of gets clouded in history. But every year, it seems like the 2 teams that are in the finals kind of get those breaks injury-wise. But I was surprised to see the Warriors favored from the aspect of I felt like they faced less pressure in these first 3 rounds than Boston did. And I feel like anytime you go through Giannis, that's obviously not an easy feat. So I think when you look at that and then you look at the punches that Miami was throwing them, specifically Jimmy Butler in games 6 and 7, I think Boston's resilience, and also they've been like a historically great team on the road in the playoffs this year. So I think those two teams could bode very well for them in the series. And also, when you look at the adjustments that Udoka has made over the first 3 series, he's proven that they're going to make critical adjustments, specifically on how they're going to defend teams in the pick and roll. And so I think that Boston has a little bit more of an edge here than people think, but they have to get one of those first 2 games, or else you're in trouble. Because if you have to win 3 out of your next 4 games against Golden State, that's not going to be a good recipe.
Yeah, I would just say, I don't think that the Warriors need to have as hard of a road as the Celtics did, just because of their history. Starting 4 out of 5 players on Golden State, they've all been, played in games where they were down 15, down 20 in the playoffs. Last year, years before, not last year, obviously, but previous playoffs, previous finals. I mean, they were a game away from elimination against the Rockets. Came back, won the series. So I think it's they don't need as much as that just because they've experienced it before. It's, I don't think anybody would get up here and say that Warriors aren't a battle-tested team. Obviously, the Celtics are, as you said, beating Giannis. That's almost like the chip right there, right? So,
right.
Both teams kind of have that. Celtics have it right now, in terms of morale, locker room culture. They feel like, they can go and do it. But I don't think it's fair to say the Warriors don't have that. I think one of the things we saw with the Warriors in general, played a lot of teams this playoffs besides the Nuggets, in my opinion, who are really streaky. Every other, other matchups, they're 10, 15-point runs kind of unanswered. And when you would see that happen against the Warriors, especially in the last 2 rounds, Mavs, Grizzlies, they were really able to combat that, get together, come back, and be the Warriors. So I think for them, it's like riding a bike. You never really lose that once you get it. They also don't, I know people are saying that the pressure is obviously on the Warriors. Underdog always kind of has no pressure. But, I think Draymond said something pretty interesting the other day that, for the younger guys on the team, is that if you go and get them a ring early in their career, they don't have to worry about it after that. And I think that's definitely one of the things that is kind of underrated about the Warriors. I don't think this is 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where it's fresh off dynasty, a lot of pressure. People are expecting, you to blow out every team. They're battle tested. They're obviously experienced. And then again, they've been there before. They know the runs. They're not going to get emotional about it. So I don't think it matters as much, but obviously, right now, Celtics are most battle tested team.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. Battle tested this year versus over the last 5 to 10. But yeah, I mean, I was excited to see the Dubs back into another championship opportunity and spot, especially because they are going against the Celtics. I was kind of torn in that Game 7. Here, I got a question. I guess, Henry, it sounds like you're pretty into this. I'm not sure how much you've looked into it, and maybe Hilltop, you want to touch on this, and Ronnie, feel free to pop in. I'm not sure how much you've looked at the history of conference finals, but if the Boston Celtics had lost that Game 7 versus the Miami Heat to that comeback, especially after they really should have closed things out in Game 6, do you think that would have been one of the worst Game 7 losses in the history of the NBA Conference Championship?
I mean, it has to be. I don't know. Yeah. I think regardless, if you're up a good amount in a Game 7 and, that kind of comeback, and, they really got lucky that, obviously you can go back and forth. Jimmy's right to take the shot. No one's mad at it. I'm not mad at it, but, he's getting everything inside all game that he wanted. So he takes it inside and one layup or hits that 3. And now you're definitely the worst blow, at least we've seen in a while. There's been a bunch of, even that Warrior series with the Rockets, a couple games, they were up huge. But yeah, that would easily be up there. I'm not sure what the exact stat would be of kind of what would make it worse, or as far as I can remember.
It would have to be one of the worst, especially if it ended in a Jimmy Butler 3-pointer. Like that.
Yeah, it's true, because he shoots like 23%.
Celtics fans would not be able to get over that for centuries, truly, because when you look at the opportunity that they've had in just the last 4 years, they've been knocking on the door year after year, and they finally have a great opportunity this year. Health-wise, they get everything to go their way, and just to lose in that fashion would be undoubtedly one of the most historic collapses in NBA history.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other comment I'll put on that, and I thought you made an interesting point, that Jimmy Butler 3. Ronnie, I'd love to get your thoughts. What do you think about the Jimmy Butler 3? And then I'll give my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think in the moment, obviously, he's your best player. He's your best scorer. And so him taking that shot wasn't a bad shot. I mean, obviously, he had made one earlier in the game. He had, 30-plus points at that point. And so, for him, it's a judgment call. You don't know how he feels. He comes down. It's a free jump to a scorer. And so I don't think it was a bad shot. But considering the situation, I think that's what sets a lot of guys apart is situational awareness. And so in that moment, it's like, do you play for an overtime or, for an extended game to give your team a better chance, which I think they may have won had they gone into overtime. And so just looking at it, but you can't say it was bad because you're talking about the best player on the team in that situation with pretty much walking into his shot. He's not a high percentage 3-point shooter, but, I think given that moment, how many points he had at that time, like you can never be mad at him being overly aggressive, trying to win the game.
Ronnie, you mentioned the logic of going to overtime or not there. I think Jimmy Butler, he had played 48 minutes in that game. So I think that kind of played into the logic of just going for the win right there because you had a good chance to win it in overtime. It's not necessarily a guarantee that game even goes to overtime. If they hit that shot, there's still at least 10 to 12 seconds left. Boston has a timeout. They can go get in their best set offensively. They were in the bonus. They could maybe get to the line. And then you still have 5 more minutes after that to try to go win a game. So I do think it just would have been a lot harder than, okay, here we go to overtime and win. I think Butler was truly gassed, and he saw an opportunity to win the game right there and took it. And it was the right choice. If you're a Heat fan, I don't know how you can be mad at that shot.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing at all. I think it's just in that moment too. Like you got to think about it. Who has the momentum going into into overtime? Like, is it the Heat? Is it the motivation of the other players? Does Bam Badagio, whatever, get an opportunity to get in? Because the Celtics up until that point, they hadn't scored a lot in that last 2 minutes, and so they were struggling to score the basketball. And so I don't even think it was necessarily a comeback by Miami, more so of a letdown by the Celtics because they just weren't. They had no sense of urgency. You can look at when they were taking the ball out, like how things looked. They were pretty methodical about going through it because I think they felt like they had the game wrapped up. And so had it come down to that shot, I feel like they would have been really ultimately deflated had he made that shot. And so even coming out of a set, I think that's the other thing going into this series is who is at that moment, like who is that closer for Boston? I think Tatum's going to be the one with the ball, but from a percentage standpoint, who comes down in that situation and who is saying, give me the ball, I want to take the last shot?
If you ask Marcus Smart, it's Marcus Smart, but I agree with you, it's Tatum.
Yeah. We've got about just 1 or 2 minutes left here. We have our next speakers up for the next space, so I'll go ahead and say, Ronnie, I completely agree with you. I honestly was with this play. I was looking at it saying, that drive to the basket, Jimmy's been doing it all night. He could go up and try to get fouled, right? He'll still get free throws, have an opportunity to tie it up that way, can go for the end one. But at the end of the day, I think there were a couple of factors that went into it. One, we've talked about, I don't think he was thinking about legacy or anything like that in the moment. But if you think back to it, this is the same play that happened in Philadelphia 3 years ago, where he had the opportunity for that 3. He instead took the 2. There were a few seconds left. Kawhi got the shot off, and the rest is history. So that did happen, where he did not go for that dagger. Number 2, completely agree. He did not want to go to overtime. He played every single minute of that game, literally every single minute. There was no way that he wanted overtime in that game. And then number 3, you got to take the shot, right? It's Al Horford in front of you, who's a tough person to go to the basket against. And then have this open view. You don't know if you're getting that off again. So I think we made a lot of great points here. But Ronnie, this was a great conversation. Hilltop, Henry, you guys are awesome. I'll just give you guys all a kind of final comment here, and then we'll roll into this next space. Ronnie, great having you on. Hopefully we get you on some more spaces. Anything else you'd like to share today?
No, I appreciate you guys for having me. I enjoyed it. It was a great conversation, so I look forward to future appearances.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being on. Hilltop, anything else you'd like to say?
Completely agree. Thanks for having me, guys. This is a great time, and looking forward to the finals. Should be one of the best we've had in a long time. So appreciate it again.
No doubt, no doubt. Henry?
All good. The usual, same as everybody else. Go Dubs.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, shout out to Polymarket as well. We appreciate you supporting this past space. There are markets on Polymarket. If you want to go ahead and check out those, you can see they were pinned up top. You can click into their profile. If you want to see more stuff on Polymarket, just go ahead and hop their Discord. Harry, anything else you want to say?
No, sir. Thank you very much for the space. And yeah, check out the markets. Polymarket.com. Yes, sir.
Polymarket.com. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. 6:15 on the dot. I see Tyler's gone ahead and already changed the title in the top. We are going to do some pinning of tweets, and we're ready to roll into the next. So welcome into the audience who's coming in with us for this one. I'm going to go ahead and put out a new tweet, just letting everyone know that we are live with this. I'm going to go ahead and drop a post to the beehiiv account if they want to come up. And Mr. Tyler Denk, excited to talk about this next topic here with female founders and consumer brand builders. We've got Jasmine on as well. What's going on, Tyler?
What's up? How are we doing?
Doing really good. Just had a super interesting conversation. A little bit different from my typical finance stuff, but I think we're back into the world of business now.
Yeah. What are we thinking about the NBA Finals? Are we excited?
You know, there was a lot of people thinking the Celtics are going to be pretty gritty and not easy to run through, I think was the general sentiment. It was really cool. We had on one of Jaylen Brown's close friends, as well as Ronnie was just on here. He was a number 2 overall draft pick in 2005 for the NFL. And some other great athletes that kind of joined us and talked us through their thought process. But yeah, everybody, the consensus is we're going to have a good one.
I'm excited to watch the transition from NBA Finals preview to female founders and consumer brand builders. But if there's anyone that can do it, it's probably you, Wolf.
Well, I appreciate it. You know what? We've been really, really just transitioning throughout. Yesterday, we actually did 10 and a half hours straight on Spaces. It was the longest that we've actually had a straight open Wolf Space. And we went through 9 different topics. So I will say to anybody that's in the audience, this is the hallmark of Wolf Spaces. If you just found me through that last space, I do a lot of different types of content, mostly surrounding the world of business. And I'm really excited for this space that we have coming up now. So definitely stick around. We have on JasmineGarnsworthy, as well as the beehiiv team, beehiiv being the #1 newsletter platform for creators on Twitter. Just set it up today. I got my integration into my profile. I have a paid account on beehiiv. I'm helping the bottom line, Tyler. So I'm ready to get into it right here.
Let's do it. Jasmine, how are we? It's early in Australia, isn't it?
Hey, yeah, it's pretty early over here, but I'm good. I tuned into the last kind of couple of minutes of the NBA conversation. I can tell you that is not my forte, but I'm keen to get into the consumer brand building and female founder conversation.
We are also keen to hear all about your expertise there as well. So I'm excited.
Awesome.
Iman.
Go
ahead, Wolf.
I was just going to ask Jasmine to kind of give us a few minutes off the bat here, kind of about, what she's been up to, what she's been doing, and, especially how she got into the world of newsletters and beehiiv and everything that's going on here.
Yeah, so I run a community called Female Founder World, and we're a podcast, we're a newsletter, we are a closed community on Geneva. We have a series, virtual and in person, and it basically all kicked off. So my background, I was a fashion and beauty editor for about 10 years and in New York and Australia. And I started a skincare business called The Buff. And then during the pandemic, like in the early days during 2020, things were just, everyone was just kind of experiencing the same kind of issues. And I was reaching out to that network of founders that I guess I really connected with when I was working as an editor and building the business. And I was leaning on how handling like this issue, how are you handling it? And we just decided to take those conversations into the public realm and turning it into a podcast and newsletter and just really amplifying those insights about, how women are building consumer businesses right now.
And in your profile, you mentioned The Buff, your co-founder. there as well?
Yeah, so that's my skincare business where we do customized and tailored beauty oils. We're a clean beauty brand and we've been around since 2017.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's so many different ways we can take this conversation, both from how you started the Buff, your experience there, obviously the female founder world, and then the media play. Open to hear, I guess, like if you want to give a little bit more background on the Buff, just to kind of level set how you got into that space, what that experience has been like, and start there. I think that'll probably be a good jumping off point.
Yeah, so I've been working as a beauty editor for, oh my God, like all of the women's lifestyle publications. So the Refinery 29s, Allures, all of these kind of publications. And I was seeing a lot of customization happening in the fashion space in terms of customized packaging and branding and this kind of thing. So monogramming, and I was kind of like, hey, there's an opportunity here to take that branding and aesthetic experience into beauty and also utilize like quiz technology, which 2017, a ton of people were using that to kind of point people in the direction of a tailored formula and then allow them to monogram and create their own branded packaging as well. And that's kind of like how we started. And then we branched into some like ready to retail pre-mix products that are in kind of like Urban Outfitters, and they were in Forever 21's beauty chain while that was around. And yeah, I guess like the learning that I've had have been kind of across, my first-hand experience with that business, but mostly just having these conversations with women who are building much bigger companies than what I've built and how they're doing it and what's working right now. We've spoken with founders of some of the biggest beauty companies in the world now, and their learnings are just, I would say, let's lean on those because they're much more valuable than my first-hand experience for sure.
And how many employees is the Buff right now?
So it's really, really small, and we lean completely on contractors and freelancers. I work with, a freelance graphic designer, and it's super, super lean.
Awesome. And then as far as when you kicked off the female founder world, was there a certain point with the Buff where you really leaned into getting feedback and creating some sort of community for others in the space? Or like, was it a collective effort? Just kind of like founding story behind the female founder world and what kind of led you to start that?
Yeah, I guess it was really that realization of how much I needed. There's only so much you can Google, and like I'm a big believer that if you want to start something, you can usually get it going just by Googling. You don't need to have a ton of like subject matter expertise to get going with any kind of consumer business. But I was at a point where I really needed to lean on folks who had that operational experience and knew what the hell they were doing. And I was able to reach out to these women because I'd worked as an editor for years. So I had this network of consumer brand builders and women who were building, particularly in the beauty and the wellness space. And I could lean on them for actual one-on-one advice, learn what they did in exactly the same situations that I was facing. And being someone who's got that editorial and publishing background, I realized how valuable that information is. And I guess I had an understanding of how to build an audience around it. And so that's why we turned it into the podcast and the newsletter series.
And as someone who's less familiar with Geneva, do you want to pitch me on what?
Yeah, Geneva's awesome.
Now that I'm looking at the
I want to hear
website,
this.
I think I was actually just pitched on Geneva being like a Gen Z mix of Slack and GroupMe.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
It's Gen Z Slack. It's totally Gen Z Slack. And yeah, we love Geneva. It's definitely like our community is a mix of probably younger millennials and Gen Z. And I think the Gen Z are much more native to the platform and they're on it all the time. They're in different kind of rooms and different spaces and different, they call Geneva homes. And so they're kind of on there already, whereas I'm kind of trying to like bring in our millennial audience as well to use the platform, but they're definitely not as native to it. But essentially what Geneva is, it's like, I guess, any community platform like a Mighty Networks or something like that, but it's much more, I feel like it's much cleaner, much more intuitive. You can be a part of multiple homes and they kind of like all appear on your dashboard. It's just, it's a place for more organized group chats, and quite a lot of brands now have Geneva communities where they host live workshops. They have like audio conversations like this one with their community. They bring in guest speakers. It's a really, really cool space.
And so the overall operation is community within Geneva, the twice a week podcast, and then the newsletter, correct?
Yeah, and we do events as well. We just had a really a pretty large event with Shopify in New York in April. And that was kind of the first big in-person panel event we had. If people are familiar with like the consumer brand space and female founders, we had the founder of a sustainable period care company called August, and her name's Nadia Okamoto, and she spoke about they've built a following of 3 million on TikTok around her and their mission and the brand. And so she spoke about that. We had Jen Batchelor, who's the founder of King Euphorics, which is a better for you beverage business that has Bella Hadid as their co-founder, and that's been a really amazing business in the wellness space. And then we also had the founder of the skincare business called Hyperskin on the panel as well. And so we had the full panel of established founders, and then afterwards we had kind of breakout spaces. We had a female founder cafe where you could sample food and drink from the different founders who had been on the podcast, and we're doing that again, it looks like in August in LA.
Awesome. As Iman and I are both located in LA, definitely super curious. So keep us updated with the event details there.
Sure.
So full-time job is the buff. Female founder world is a side hustle of sorts. Or are you planning to monetize it? Did you monetize with the events? Or I guess where do you see, how would you describe what female founder world is now as like an enterprise or community? And then like, what are your long-term goals of like what it hopefully becomes?
Yeah, we're already monetized. We've been monetized for a little while. We've got sponsors on the podcast and for our workshop series as well. And yeah, we're just growing. So we're at the moment looking for distribution partners for the podcast. If anyone knows anyone, give me a shout. And we're really just growing our audience, working on bringing on sponsors on the paid products that we offer as well. So that's like the focus. And honestly, it's pretty 50-50 in terms of how I'm splitting my time across the consumer brand and the community now. The community is just taking off. Like we're growing pretty quickly. So I'm definitely like putting quite a bit of time into that as well.
And then one last question before Iman jumps in with a few questions. But as far as like people joining the community, are there any requirements? Is it fairly open? There's just a link and you can sign up for, obviously the newsletter is fairly open and anyone can download a podcast. But as far as the Geneva invite, is there any sort of application process, or is it as many female founders or aspirational female founders as possible?
Yeah, so there's a link from the website Female Founder World. You can just join. It's in the top nav bar, and we do have like some gates to the community. You kind of fill out an application to join, and that's just to make sure that we have people who are building consumer brands. Like we're definitely not for folks who are building service-based businesses. We're not for anyone who's building tech or community-based businesses. Like this is really, do you have a physical product that you are selling on e-com and you're looking for stockists? And it's whether you're kind of actively selling and trading now or you're working towards a launch, we kind of have both of those stages.
Nice. I'll go ahead and hop in here. Jasmine, it's so great to have you and love hearing about your background. Hello. I want to take on kind of a different approach now that we kind of have an idea of your background, and also urge anybody in the audience, like ask any questions along the way as well. Two things that I wanted to discuss with you are, first one, kind of taking on a different approach, but women in like predominantly male fields, whether that be like e-commerce, tech, or whatever, kind of your thoughts on that and how we can get more women in these spaces. And then also, after that, kind of focusing on just like female founded companies. I know you talk a little bit about why it's so much harder for women founders to get funding, specifically people of color. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on both of those.
Yeah, look, I'm definitely more focused on the consumer space, and I would say even in consumer brands, when we get to a certain kind of like revenue threshold, these bigger businesses are founded by and run by men. We don't see like a equal 50-50 split, even though women are starting businesses at a faster rate than men. Once we get to that kind of like high level of success, we're not seeing as many women. And I think that there are a few reasons for that. And one of them is the access to funding that you just mentioned. Like, women get less than 2% of VC funding. That's in the last year. And that is wild because women are building incredibly successful businesses. We know that when women do get VC funding, that their companies perform better than male-run companies. And so I think that, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is, okay, how do we help to be that kind of connective tissue between women and the funding community and that ecosystem? How do we connect women with the knowledge and the resources that they need to build really big, meaningful companies? And quite often that means connecting them with each other so that they can learn from each other's experiences. And once we have more women who are, they have those bigger exits, we'll find that they'll invest back in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that just means more funding for women-owned businesses. So it's really about helping to leverage that female founder community now and help them grow so that they can invest back in the ecosystem as they're successful.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So were there specific challenges or conversations that you were having earlier on that made you realize we should start this and put it in a newsletter and start the conversation that way?
Yeah. So I think most of the conversations, yes, there's been some firsthand experience in terms of, I think, just gaps in my own knowledge, gaps in what I had access to and what my network looks like. And then also speaking with other founders as well, and just kind of understanding the challenges that they were having, yes, around fundraising, but also in so many other areas of their business, where I just think having that network and having that community to lean on is really important. On the podcast, one of the last questions that we ask people is, do you have a resource recommendation? And I'm really angling for, hey, is there a book? Is there a podcast? Is there something super tangible that you think people should go and engage with if they're interested in building a consumer business? And honestly, at least half the time, the answer is go and find some great people and build a community and network of founders around you, because they'll be so valuable as your business grows. And so I think that just speaks to how important that community is.
For sure. And as for any women that are looking to pitch to specific investors, because it is a little bit more challenging, can you offer advice for not only the women that are pitching, but also the investors that may be a little bit blind to kind of just the reality of how it goes, and why typically men with lesser ideas will still get funding, whereas women often face more challenges in that?
Yeah, look, we still hear lots of stories about women who are pitching their business ideas. And to be honest, I really think that if you're creating a product that is targeting women, you need to have at least one female co-founder. I have a lot of problems with men being the primary kind of innovators and people benefiting off the beauty industry. But anyway, that's a different tangent. But I just think in terms of tips, first of all, we have a workshop that is recorded and that anyone in our community can access, which is with a venture capitalist who invests in women. And that is available on demand, and it walks through how to put together your pitch deck and how to really perfect your pitch, build out your VC CRM, all of that really tactical, tangible information. And it's available for free through to our community. So you can check that out through the website and watch it on demand. And we hear a lot of stories about, women building businesses who are pitching to VCs, and they're still getting that crazy, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just going to ask my wife, or I'll ask my daughter, or they're looking at it because they don't have that personal affinity with the customer. They think that it's a lesser idea or a smaller market. And we're still seeing people think that, a female consumer is a niche audience, which is just crazy. And I think that, if people want intros to women building amazing businesses, I'm very happy to facilitate. We've got heaps in our community.
Yeah, I love that. I kind of want to get your thoughts on also getting more men to join these conversations. I feel I don't know, we're kind of reaching a societal approach where it's there are so many women supporting one another, but I think it's important that there's also men in these situations that are also there to not only defend but also support these women. Have you like had any experience in that, or like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it needs to be, everyone needs to be involved in the solution, and we definitely need people who are already in positions of power to pay it forward and not like gatekeep their networks and their resources. And you know what, like I'm not an expert in how we engage men in this conversation. I'm definitely like more focused on like my specific community. But yeah, I would just say, if you also don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for intros and, you know, admit that you don't know all of the answers. I think that maybe there is some hesitancy to, I don't know, try and get involved in this space because they're not women, or they don't have an amazing track record so far. But I just think, you know, there's always room for improvement, and don't be shy about asking for advice.
Yeah, definitely. One more thing that I kind of thought was interesting was you wrote a little bit about how more women are starting businesses than ever before, but there's still a gap in earnings in comparison to founded businesses. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I wish I had that research at my fingertips, but I don't. But we do see that, for example, there was an NPR, I think it was NPR, episode that was released on one of their podcasts quite recently, and it was for International Women's Day. And they basically, you know, tried to buy women-owned, they tried to make a meal or shop entirely women-owned at one of the big grocery stores. And they found that once the brands had kind of reached that level of distribution, that they'd either the founders had left, they'd brought in a male CEO, or they were always founded by a man in the beginning. And it was actually almost impossible for them to find companies that were led by women who were at that stage and at that scale. And I just think, yeah, we need to look at why that's happening and why women aren't getting the same level of success, even though their businesses are every bit as great.
Yeah, definitely. And as for like the pandemic, because I feel like a lot of people kind of had the encouragement to like build businesses during the pandemic, and there's a lot more smaller businesses now led by women. Can you talk about kind of the impact on that?
Yeah, I've been having this conversation recently where, you know, I'm speaking with founders and I'm like, okay, so it's literally never been easy to launch a consumer brand. It's so easy to put something out in the world now. You can do it with a really small budget and a pretty basic idea, and you can get something out there. But the real challenge that I think founders are having now is, okay, but how do you stay relevant during this boom of consumer brands? Like, how does your company that you started 5 years ago stay relevant when branding, like what is considered, you know, on trend branding is shifting so quickly, and the way that brands communicate is shifting so quickly with TikTok? And I think that is a really big challenge that we're seeing as more and more smaller businesses pop up and it becomes increasingly fragmented. A lot of the founders that we speak with think there's going to be a little bit more of a correction around that. And a lot of those brands will drop off and will consolidate back to a few more bigger companies. But there is just a wild amount of fragmentation happening in consumer right now.
Yeah, and as for those founders that you like talk to and interview, what do you feel is the most common challenge that they're all facing as women that are leading businesses or trying to start businesses?
Yeah. Look, so I think like as women, one of the issues that they have is definitely that access to funding. But, you know, the issues that they face are the same as any founders face. They're trying to figure out how to stay relevant. They're trying to figure out how to scale, a lot of them are bootstrapped because of that access to funding that I mentioned before. And so trying to figure out how to bootstrap while also managing, you know, an omni-channel approach where they are starting to get really big orders from retailers like Sephora or Whole Foods. So that's definitely like one of the really big issues. But I think that that's probably something that's, yeah, I guess experienced by all consumer brand founders.
I will hop in here with a question. So, Jasmine, in regards to Twitter, what's the conversations around this been like on Twitter? Is this have you been doing spaces that are similar to this one beforehand? Because I know that there's a lot of women who have awesome audiences on Twitter. We do like live trading with only women panels and different stuff along those lines, and I know a lot of them have been very successful in their lifetimes. But are people like building content around this? Are there channels, communities, other areas like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Twitter gal. I'm on TikTok and Instagram. That's my jam, and Geneva for the closed community. That's where I hang out. And yes, oh my God, there are so many communities on all of those platforms that are speaking exactly what, to what we are. I think that TikTok particularly has like a really big community of, there's like this small business, women owned kind of boom happening on TikTok where I don't know, if you're a small business owner and you're a woman and you've got a consumer brand, like people are really, I don't know, interested in your story. And there seems to be a lot of female founders who are fronting their companies on TikTok and sharing their stories and sharing what's working for them. So I would say TikTok is the spot to go if you want to hear, firsthand stories and get those resources from female founders who are in the trenches right now. That's the platform.
What are some of the more interesting trends you've seen on TikTok related to some of these founders, like what they're building and everything of the sort?
Yeah, I just think it's wild, so wild how there is this opportunity, but also this expectation of female founders being the face and fronting their brands on TikTok. And it's such a double-edged sword. Like I speak to some founders who are just not they don't want to be the face of the brand. They don't want to be on TikTok. They're trying to run their businesses. They don't have time. But at the same time, they know that if they show their face on there and if they are, fronting that content, it just performs so much better than if they just have content creators that they've paid or a social media manager kind of running the TikTok account. Like it's so much more personal. And I'm someone who kind of got into consumer when Instagram was kicking off, and we thought that was a level of radical transparency and that was a level of insight that we'd never had before into small business owners and how women were building their companies. But TikTok is a totally different level of transparency and just rawness, I think, in terms of founders sharing their stories.
Shifting back towards the community that you've built, where do you see the community providing the most support and help to each other? Is it actually operational and tactical advice on how to scale a consumer startup? Is it introductions to investors? Is it just a sounding board for ideas? It's probably all the above, but I'm curious if one thing jumps out more than another where you feel like the community has done an exceptionally good job.
I think, this is when I say community, like I'm speaking about the closed community, but also all of the other spaces that we interact as well, through the pod when we're having those conversations, through the events that we're doing and the workshops that we do as well. And I would say it's all of the above, but probably mostly it's that really, I don't know, it's that really tangible advice. Like, hey, I want to shift my manufacturing from China to Bali for my lingerie brand. I'm looking at these two factories. Does anyone have any experience with that? Like those really tactical things that it's pretty hard to Google. Like you want someone who has firsthand experience, who can give you that advice. And I think that's where that one-on-one interaction becomes really, really powerful and really valuable. It's the stuff that you can't necessarily Google.
And trying to remove my U.S. biases, I'm assuming the venture capital scene in terms of traditionally women companies being overlooked in the VC realm. Are you seeing any similarities, differences? Is it more or less the exact same in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, I'm based in New York. I've been in the US for about 8 years, and I'm just back in Australia visiting right now. But I'm definitely have my foot, I've got one foot in each country, and I 100% like it definitely emulates what's happening in the US for sure.
Is part of the solution? I'm sure it's like an all of the above, but having more female-led funds and investors that are making those decisions, so it's less of the stereotypical like male-led funds asking their daughters or spouses about different trends versus women actually making the investment decisions themselves.
Look, I think that's definitely part of it. I think that's a big part of it, and it's not just the the VC fund. There are great ones like Female Founders Fund, BPG Ventures. They are awesome supporters of the female founder community. But I'd say also it's kind of at that really early angel stage as well, when people are just getting off the ground and they need that capital to kind of prove out a concept or prove out an idea. And I think that that's where we're going to see, as more female founders have bigger exits and then they'll invest back in that ecosystem. I think that that's going to be where we start seeing a shift. And we already are, like there's Jacqueline Dawson was the founder of a community called Create and Cultivate. Like I think a bunch of folks would have heard of that. And she sold that business and then started New Money Ventures, where she invests in early stage companies. And I don't actually think that their thesis is specifically around investing in women, but just by the virtue of she's had exposure, she's got a network of female founders around her through the business that she's grown. She's investing back in women that way. So I think that that's like a huge part of it for sure.
What's your current? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Wolf.
No, you're good. You're good. I'll go after you.
Okay, I was just going to ask, like, what's your current strategy right now to putting your content together for your newsletter, and like what you choose to focus on when you're like sending emails out?
Sorry, you just cut out for the last bit. Was that what I choose to focus on when we're sending the emails out?
Yeah.
So we have a couple. So first of all, it's a mix of, okay, how can we pull the best insights from the podcast, from conversations we're having on social, and from our workshops into the newsletter? So that is actually pretty straightforward. Anytime we're creating any of that original content, that we have like a Excel spreadsheet that's kind of like a second brain, where we're distilling all of that information and making sure that it's getting shared across all the platforms. And then we have content that is created specifically for the newsletter as well, and that's where it is kind of like released and launched. And so I think just having content polls that we're returning to again and again, and that's something that I think everyone in publishing does, and it just makes producing a lot of content so much easier if you have those kind of content pillars that you're returning to. One of those is a founder finance diary called Let the Cash Flow, and we sometimes it's anonymous, sometimes people will let you know what their business is, and they're obviously not anonymous to me, but just anonymous when we publish. And basically these founders are giving us a really detailed look under the hood of their businesses and explaining, hey, like this is how much we made in the first year, the second year, the third year. This is when I took a salary as the founder and how much. This is what our CAC is. This is how we're investing in paid ads, and really like that information is just so valuable. And I think that it's, again, normalizing conversations around finance and money in the female founder community. So that's one of the content tentpoles that I would say is most popular in the newsletter.
All right, I'd love to pop in here for just a second because first off, Jasmine, where's the easiest place for people to go ahead and find the newsletter?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, femalefounderworld.com, I think that's the easiest spot to sign up. And then we also have you can go directly to our beehiiv link, which is femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com.
Perfect. femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com. And speaking of beehiiv, well, first off, I just want to give a big thanks, first of all, to Jasmine for answering all of our questions, but also to beehiiv for making this space really possible and bringing this together. If anybody's on here and hasn't heard of beehiiv yet, well, it's a good thing you have now. They work with a majority of the top people in the world of business and finance and sports and all these other areas on Twitter that are trying to make an impact through the email newsletter service. I'm pretty excited to announce that I not only this week switched over to a paid account on beehiiv so I can get up to 10,000 subs on there, but I also did my integration onto Twitter. So for everyone that looks, if you take a look, like, for example, I assume you could see it inside the beehiiv bio. Yes, you can go into the beehiiv bio or into my bio, and you'll see we have our newsletter actually linked right into there. And that's a review feature that Twitter introduced. For a while, it was very exclusive. It's why I was using review. And I went today to switch over, and it was literally like one click. It was built in right into the beehiiv system. It was just integrations, and I clicked in there, and it took me like 3 minutes, and I set it up. And now my subs that come in on my newsletter will be on there. But that's not the only reason I'm using it. The templates are fantastic. The best part is my emails have not been going to people's spam or even to their promotional thing. I've been testing it over the last few days. They've been going out to main email boxes. My click rate doubled this first week using beehiiv. So the people actually clicking links inside my stuff has doubled. My open rate went up 15%. So just some numbers right there just to use. So if you're in the audience and you haven't already looked into this account, first off, make sure that you're clicking in and following the beehiiv account. That's where you're going to see all the information about this. The best part is they're also super open and sharing. The CEO is literally right on here. We have Iman, who runs so much for beehiiv, who's on here as well. And they field questions through the DMs, through spaces, through the timeline. I mean, it's an incredible service here. There's never a bad time to start an email newsletter. Nowadays, you got to own your audience. Listen, my whole life, pretty much Twitter, I've got 67,000 something followers on here. Twitter could take this way tomorrow. I would have no way to restart with that. An email list, I just take it to the next place, right? I just have it. I have that email list, and I can get it to my users' inboxes. Unless Gmail shuts down, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. This is the way to own your audience succinctly. So with that being said, if you haven't already clicked in and checked it out, if you want to write a newsletter, go ahead and click on beehiiv. And if you want to read some awesome newsletters, great place to find them as well. Go hop in, check out beehiiv. You can listen to people or read people like Jasmine, Ramp Capital, Liquidity. We've had on Jack, and so many others that have come in and spoken with us about every major topic. So whether it's Sean Puri's Milk Road and you want to read about the downfall of Luna or so many other pieces, this is the place to be finding them. So once again, you could just go to beehiiv, and that is with 2 E's and 2 I's, and you can hop right into beehiiv.com and check out all these different areas. So if you want to write, grow, monetize, drop, pricing, everything, it's all right on there. Tyler, anything I missed on that? Because I'm pretty excited to be using this.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you hit it all. But just to give a bit of context, the founding team, were actually all built the internal tech and infrastructure at Morning Brew. So basically, we were building a full end-to-end, all-in-one product studio for newsletters, so creators like Jasmine can focus on the 15 other things that she's focusing on, like building her consumer brand, running the community, and the email part should be as seamless as possible to create content, to understand her analytics, to grow with the referral program, and everything else that you would expect out of a newsletter platform. So it's really just simplifying and abstracting a lot of the tech that you don't need to deal with, and incredibly creator friendly. We have some of the top newsletters in the world using our platform. And then we also like to highlight our top newsletters like Jasmine and Female Founder World each week, every Wednesday with Wolf. So just trying to amplify the voices of our top content creators. And with that, would love to transition the conversation a bit more towards the Female Founder World newsletter. I guess as like a recap, Jasmine, where are you with the newsletter? What made you want to start a newsletter? And yeah, I guess we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, like, personally, my background, I worked as an editor and as a writer for most of my career. And so I guess it's just tapping into that skills and something that, personally, I really enjoy and love doing, which I think is a big part of it. And then the second piece of it is we had been doing the podcast, and it just feels, yes, you see the numbers going up, but like, how do you kind of like capture those people in your ecosystem a little bit more? And I think that, a newsletter just felt like your audience was so much more ownable. And we could have, pretty clear insights about who was engaging in our content, who was engaging in which content, where people were clicking, what people were enjoying. So I just think we learned a lot more about the community through the newsletter. And it just gives us space to, I guess, highlight our community and female founders in a different way and share resources in a different way. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it. And yeah, I mean, the newsletter is one of our fastest growing platforms. It's between that and the podcast now, which is awesome.
And what have been the primary growth drivers for the newsletter? Is it primarily through the community where you would drop, the recent posts and encourage people to subscribe there? Is it through podcast shout outs? Is it just through your network personally? Or I guess, where have you found the most success growing the newsletter audience?
Yeah, so it's through the podcast. We do a lot of podcast ad spots with other podcasters, and we have a call, a shout out and an ad slot in there about the newsletter. So I think that's probably the biggest way, but then also through partnerships. So we did our event with Shopify, and that was a good like publicity opportunity. It went out multiple times to their email database about what we were doing and calling to sign up to our newsletter. So that's been a big growth driver. And then we use the referral program within beehiiv as well, which has been awesome.
Awesome. Love to hear it. What's the operation look like? Are you currently writing the newsletter each week or every other week?
Yeah. So I'm writing the newsletter. The team is literally, we've got a podcast editor, a virtual assistant who helps with, basically helps with like pulling all of the key learnings from the podcast. And then I turn that into the longer form copy in the newsletter. And we also have someone who helps on like social and TikTok content, but the newsletter is my domain. I enjoy doing it, so I haven't handed it off to anyone yet.
What surprised you the most about just the newsletter space and like the whole operation behind it?
Oh, what surprised me? Look, this is the first time I've done a newsletter, but I've obviously done a lot of email marketing through the consumer brand before, and we'd been using the same email platform for the Female Founder World newsletter as what we were using for the consumer business. And that was not the fit, like for a longer form content based newsletter, it just like, it was so different to an e-com EDM that that's, I think, why making the switch to beehiiv has just made things so much easier. Like the templates are so much easier to use. It just lends itself to that like richer content in a much, for creators in like a much more intuitive way, I'd say. So I think it's, just that difference between platforms work for an e-com business versus the platforms that work for an editorial content-based business.
And you said you're already monetizing the podcast. Do you have plans to monetize the newsletter at some point in the future?
Yeah, so we do. So we'll actually start monetizing it from this Friday. It will be the first paid newsletter, and that's one of our podcast sponsors also taking over the newsletter as well, which is super exciting.
So another shameless plug, femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com. You should subscribe now so you can read the first monetized newsletter ever from Female Founder World this Friday.
I'm going to type that and pin it up top so people can find it a little bit easier. It's femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com, right?
That's it, yeah.
All right, so that is...
No S on founder. It's singular.
Singular.
Yes. Female Founder World. I think I got it right. It is pinned up top, so anybody that wants to go see that, I just made that a little bit easier to click into. It's just the last pinned one. Okay, Jasmine, I need your advice. I'm new to having a paid account on beehiiv. I upgraded because I was over 2,500 subs. For anybody that's in the audience, you don't even have to pay anything to use this if you're under 2,500 subs. What are the features that I'm going to like the most? Like what should I test out? I've sent out a few newsletters on here, but I haven't like really played around with it, to the point that you probably have.
Okay, so the referral program I feel like is the obvious one and the easiest one to get going with. And we've been using that since day one with beehiiv, so definitely get going on that. And I mean, it's just, for me, it's just like building the newsletter. It's so much easier than other platforms. Being able to drag the content, everything is so clear and easy. It's exactly like, I think I first found out about beehiiv through the Milk Road, the crypto newsletter, and I was just looking at it and thinking how clean it looked. It felt like there was no confusing, distracting, superfluous stuff in the template. And so we just moved pretty much straight to it after I saw that template. So I think it's just about playing with the different like visual options that are available that actually make it really valuable. And that's what I love about it.
Okay, very interesting. What's up, Tyler?
Sorry, I was going to say, from the advertising standpoint, have you found it easier to kind of cross-sell multi-channel? So you're offering to brands isn't just a podcast or just a newsletter, but you can kind of guarantee impressions across two mediums. I know you just started monetizing the newsletter as of this Friday, but just kind of curious from what you've experienced there.
Yeah, I definitely think having it's also being able to like package things up. So it's okay, you can sponsor across all channels for a period of X amount of months as well. We can guarantee this kind of coverage during that time. So having like multiple channels that you can sell into, I think works out really well when you're trying to package stuff up in that way. Yeah, so for that reason, I would say, but like we're just kicking off with the sponsorship on the newsletter. So I'll have to come back on next week and let you know how it performs.
Yeah, definitely let us know. As far as like advice you would give to other female founders who may be listening, what's your one top of mind piece of advice that you would provide?
Yeah, I think it depends on what stage you're at in your business. I do think that peer mentorship is something that's really undervalued, and this is I'm paraphrasing and copying the advice that somebody else gave on the show, but I just thought it was so great. And it's that when you're at a panel event and you're listening to these incredible founders on the panel and they're so inspiring, like don't ignore the people who are sitting in the audience around you. Introduce yourself to the folks who are there with you. They've got the same interests as you. Maybe they're not as far ahead in their kind of business story and their founder story, but their businesses will grow as yours grows, and they're going to be the people that provide more value to you than the folks who have these really established companies and who probably don't have time for mentorship. But really it's just building that community and building the community where you are now. They don't have to be people that are 10 steps ahead of you.
Awesome. Great advice. Iman, do you have anything?
Yeah, I believe one of my friends just joined, and she actually started a little side hustle that basically connects different companies with women. So it's specifically for women recruiting.
Awesome.
I don't know if she can hear me, but Sarah, if you want to hop up here, I think it'd be great to hear from you and maybe from Jasmine.
I'm looking for Sarah to see if I see her in the crowd. Do you know what the username is?
Let me see.
Okay. Yeah, while we're taking a moment, Jasmine, I have one other question here, which is, ideally in like a year from now, what does this look like?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, something that I'm really focused on now is that distribution partner. So I think that having a distribution partner for the podcast is going to be an absolute game changer. And that's a huge focus for us because at the moment, how you grow through podcasts is through, I guess, manually lining up partnerships. But having a distribution partner would, I think, really change the trajectory. I think another like big goal for us is having those longer term sponsored packages so that we have more consistent revenue, and then also building in ways to offer paid products to the community. So right now, all of our resources to the community are free. They're funded by brand sponsors. But figuring out what it looks like to monetize at a community level, like I think that would be, we'll have that down pat within the next year.
Okay, sweet. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
While we just have a few minutes left here, Mendy, I saw you were in the crowd, so just figured I'd invite you up for a second just because we are talking about female founders and a lot of stuff going on in the consumer brand building. And I feel like you're pretty involved in both brand building and being a female founder. So if you wanted to maybe just give a minute or two about yourself as we come to kind of part of the close of this, that'd be great if you're able to share.
Oh, yeah. I didn't. I had just stopped by to kind of see the space because I very much am a supporter of women in crypto, but of course women in general. And it's one of those things of yes, I am a founder of and then Grove Business, two separate things. And so, and I've been trading crypto since 2013. And, it's strange. It's, how do I say it? Back when I first started, which, it was almost considered an alien to be a woman. Like when someone finally spoke to you, it was, oh, you're a woman? Like my image wasn't good enough, because so many, fake image. But we have come a long way as far as our own recognition and being seen as as individuals, even not just in crypto, but in my life, because I have a business background. You would be amazed at the amount of times, could not count for you, the amount of times that I've been told, I'll do business with a woman, go get me a man. I could not count for you the amount of times that I've been told that to my face. And so anytime that you see something that is for women, even if it's a topic that you know nothing about, or is not part of something that you understand, please take 2 seconds and go support it, because you may think that it does not matter, but it does matter that someone stood beside you and said, I don't really understand or not part of whatever you're doing, but I still support you. And being a woman to another woman, that all matters. That's just my own thought process and how that I do it. So I'm really happy that you all had this space today and other women were recognized for their work.
Really appreciate you sharing that, Mendy. Yeah, it's incredible what you're building. We had Mendy on a space last week to talk about the growth token and what they're doing. And I mean, just for an hour, just answered all of our questions, displayed a real in-depth knowledge of the crypto industry, of the sustainability industry. So yeah, really appreciate you coming up and sharing that. And absolutely, we definitely strive to have these spaces where we can highlight people. We highlight people that are doing, incredible things in the world, regardless of who they are. But especially lately, we've been doing more and more of these spaces to, showcase female founders who you point out just haven't had that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me up.
Of course. Appreciate that. Iman?
Yeah, for sure. So just last question that I'd kind of like to ask all the creators. Do you have any advice for any other creators that are looking to start a newsletter or have a newsletter, or any of your experiences that you can possibly share with them?
Yeah, I think when you're just getting started and you don't have a big audience, I think that one of the best ways to grow, and this is if you're doing a newsletter or any kind of content-based company, your talent and the people that you're including in the newsletter are a really big resource for growth, and really tap into them. Make sure that you're creating content for them to amplify on social and with their audiences. You'd be surprised how open and willing people are to, even if you have a really small audience when you're getting started, how willing they are to be featured. And people are so often flattered to be included in even like small community initiatives. So I think don't be afraid to ask some of those folks that you're inspired by to interview them, to contribute knowledge, and to highlight them in your newsletter, and then share it back with them and say, hey, look at this feature that we did on you. Thanks so much for that information. It's going to be so helpful to our community. This is how you can share it with your community. And I think that's like one of the easiest, scrappiest ways that you can build your audience when you're literally just getting started.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you for that.
Okay, perfect. So Tyler, I know that we are a little short on time here and that there's been a bunch of stuff going on, but want to thank, big thank you to Jasmine and to Mendy, as well as the beehiiv team. I don't see the beehiiv account up here right now, but one more time, huge shout out to beehiiv for supporting the space. As I noted today, I switched over to beehiiv as my email service of choice. I just thought there were a lot of pros. I love the team. I enjoy doing spaces with them. They come up here. I think that there's a real validity to people that come on spaces and just kind of engage with the community, answer questions. It definitely means a lot to me in my world. But of course, the tool itself being really, really great for helping me to build my audience and send out emails and have them not go to spam, and having great templates. There was a lot of reasons for me to use it. So one more time, if you're someone in the audience that's looking to either write a newsletter, it's always a good time to start. Doesn't matter what you're writing about. People are interested in all different types of topics nowadays. You can write about world history, you can write about sports, you can write about politics, you can write about the stock market. You will be able to build an audience if you keep at it. With that being said, if you also are looking for some great newsletters, we have a good one pinned up top for you to check out. That is femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com. That's where you can read more from Jasmine as well. So with that being said, let's just go around and get some closing thoughts and comments from the people up here. And I'll also make a post after this if anybody wants to check it out, just about, my switch over to beehiiv. But Jasmine, great having you on. Anything else you'd like to share with us here today?
No, but just thank you so much for having me on, and for creating this platform to chat about female founders. It's what I love to speak about. And if anyone wants to reach out, yes, join the newsletter. You can also find me on Instagram as well. That's where I hang out, at JasmineGarnsworthy. And feel free to hop into my DMs if you have specific questions about what we're doing. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Jasmine. Iman, anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine, for coming on. This has been a great conversation and very insightful. As usual, if anybody is looking to start a newsletter or has a newsletter and they have any questions, let me know. You can DM me, send me an email, whatever it is. I'll be happy to help.
Yeah, Iman's quick with it. All right, Tyler.
Just echoing what everyone else has already said, but definitely check out femalefounderworld.beehiiv.com to subscribe. First paid newsletter going out on Friday, or I guess one that's making money for Jasmine and team. But yeah, we do these every Wednesday. We highlight different newsletters, different creators, ranging from crypto to sports, the female founders to wine and everything in between. And so we love to amplify the voices of the content creators on our platform. Iman and I absolutely love doing these spaces. And yeah, thanks for joining. This was a great one. Highly recommend the newsletter. And if you have a newsletter, definitely check out beehiiv to be the home for creating your content, scaling your audience, monetizing, all the above.
Perfect. Thank you all. If you are interested in finding this recording, I'm going to try to get it up onto YouTube and Spotify. It'll also be posted on my timeline. Hope everybody has a great rest of your evening. If you are interested in investing in the cannabis sector, I'll be doing a space on that in about 5 minutes, featuring some real experts from the world of cannabis, including the Wolf of Weed Street, Jason Spatfora, Toby from Mayor Toby. He's a big cannabis expert. And then Brad Freeman from Stock Market Nerd. So you can catch that in 5 minutes. Big shout out again to the beehiiv team. Thank you, Jasmine, Tyler, Iman, Mendy for coming up. I look forward to our space next week. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening.